The streets of Manhattan glittered with holiday lights, but for Liam Whitaker, Christmas Eve felt more like an obligation than a miracle. As the CEO of a sprawling tech empire, he had grown used to late nights and empty holidays, burying himself in work to outrun the silence of his own home. Snow fell in soft veils against the glass towers, the world outside bustling with carolers, couples, and families huddled together for warmth. But behind the gleaming facade of Whitaker Enterprises, in a narrow alley littered with trash and flickering security lights, a story far different from polished holiday cheer was unfolding. Liam was heading out after a long day, his polished leather shoes crunching against the frozen pavement, when he heard it. A small, trembling voice, so faint it could have been mistaken for the wind. "Sir, I just wanted to find my mom." He froze. Turning toward the sound, his chest tightened at the sight. A little girl, no more than 5, was curled up between 2 dumpsters, her fragile frame swallowed by an oversized coat that dragged against the dirty ground. Her hair, tangled and wet from the snow, clung to her cheeks. One shoe was missing, the other barely hanging on, her tiny toes red with cold. She lay on flattened cardboard like it was a bed, clutching a worn-out backpack beneath her head as if it were the only thing she had left in the world. For a long moment, Liam couldn't breathe. A man who had faced billion-dollar negotiations and ruthless competitors now found himself paralyzed by the sight of a child who looked like she hadn't felt safe or warm in far too long. The little girl coughed, her body shaking from the effort. "I was trying to find the hospital," she whispered, her voice cracked and hoarse. "Where my mommy works, but I don't know where it is." Without thinking, Liam dropped to his knees beside her, unwrapping the scarf from his neck and carefully tucking it around hers. Her small hands clutched the fabric instantly, desperate for warmth. Her fingernails were blue, her lips trembling. "Hey," he murmured softly, his voice breaking in a way he hadn't heard in years. "It's okay, I've got you now, you're safe." Her eyes lifted, wide and dull with exhaustion, carrying a weight no child should ever know. And in that instant, something inside Liam cracked open. A memory of his late wife, of the daughter he had lost years ago, and the promise he had once made to always protect what mattered most. Snow thickened in the air as he pulled out his phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. But even as he gave the location, his other arm instinctively scooped the little girl into his chest. She didn't fight. She simply leaned into him, as though some part of her had been waiting for this moment of safety. "Don't worry," Liam whispered, tightening his hold as the ambulance siren wailed in the distance. "You're not alone anymore. Not tonight." The ambulance jolted forward, its siren slicing through the snow-heavy night as Liam sat stiffly in the back, cradling the little girl against his chest. Her body felt weightless in his arms, yet unbearably fragile, like holding a glass ornament that might shatter at any wrong move. The paramedics worked quickly, wrapping her in blankets, fitting a small oxygen mask over her tiny face, their voices urgent but professional. Liam barely registered their instructions. His eyes never left her. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked again, gently brushing a damp curl from her forehead. Her lips parted weakly. "Ella," she whispered, her voice barely audible beneath the hum of the oxygen. "Ella," he repeated softly, letting the name settle inside him. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Liam. You're safe now." Her fingers twitched, clutching at his coat, then went still again as exhaustion won out. Liam swallowed hard, the sound rough in his throat. He told himself not to get attached, that this was temporary, that once the doctors had her, his part would be over. But even as he thought it, he knew it was a lie. Something about this child, the quiet bravery in her dull eyes, the way she had trusted him without hesitation, had already pierced through armor he hadn't realized he was still wearing. By the time the ambulance pulled into St. Teresa's Hospital, the storm outside had thickened. Snow swirled in heavy sheets under the glow of the streetlights. Liam followed as the paramedics wheeled Ella inside, his pulse quickening at the sterile brightness of the ER. Nurses swarmed, voices overlapping, machines beeping. He kept pace beside the gurney until they directed him to wait in the corridor. Minutes stretched like hours until finally a nurse approached. "She's stable," she said. "Mild hypothermia and exhaustion. We'll keep her overnight for observation." Liam nodded, relief washing over him. But his heart clenched again when he saw Ella stirring in the small hospital bed. her tiny hands clutching the blanket as if it might slip away. He stepped closer. "Hey, brave girl," he whispered. "You did it. You made it to the hospital." Her eyelids fluttered open, confusion clouding her gaze. "Is Mommy here?" she croaked, her throat raw. Liam's breath caught. "Do you remember where she works?" Ella frowned, lifting a small finger to her chest as if pointing to an invisible badge. "Her jacket has letters here. Blue jacket. It says St. Teresa something." Liam exhaled quietly. Relief and dread tangled in his chest. "Yes, Ella, this is St. Teresa's." Her shoulders slumped, the tension easing ever so slightly. "She said if anything happened, if she didn't come home, I should go to the hospital." Her voice cracked. "So I tried." Liam sat beside her, his throat tightening. "What happened last night?" "I waited," she whispered. "She always comes home before the big dark. But the clock went past dinner, past cartoons, and she still didn't come." Her small hands twisted in the blanket. "So I put on my coat and boots. I followed the lights above the stores, but then it snowed hard and I got lost. I didn't know which way anymore." Tears burned Liam's eyes as he listened. The image of this child wandering block after block in the blizzard, determined to find her mother, seared into him. "Why didn't you ask someone for help?" he asked gently. She sniffled, her lip trembling. "She told me not to talk to strangers, but I was so cold." Liam reached for her hand, his voice unsteady. "Ella, you were braver than most grown-ups. You kept going, and now you're safe." Her eyes lifted to his, wide and raw with exhaustion. "Are you a doctor?" He managed a faint smile. "No, just someone who found you." A small silence settled between them, fragile and sacred. Then she whispered, "Thank you for stopping." Liam nodded, but deep inside something far heavier stirred. She reminded him of Lily, his Lily, the daughter he had lost years ago. The same wide, innocent eyes, the same quiet trust. The ache of loss pressed against his ribs, sharp and merciless. But he forced himself to breathe. Not this time. Not this child. As Ella drifted back to sleep, Liam stepped out to the nurse's station, his hands trembling slightly as he flipped through intake records. His eyes scanned the pages, names, times, brief notes. Then he froze. Unidentified female patient, admitted last night, found unconscious in staff stairwell. Possible stroke, no ID. The timestamp, just after 8 p.m. The same time Ella said she had started waiting. Liam's heart lurched. "This Jane Doe," he said quickly to the nurse. "What does she look like?" The nurse frowned, flipping through a chart. Mid-30s blonde, thin build. She's in ICU, still unresponsive. She looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Is she someone you know?" "Maybe," Liam said hoarsely. "I think she might be the mother of the girl I brought in last night." The nurse's expression softened. "Give me a minute." Moments later, Liam stood outside the ICU, Ella's small hand clutching his. She blinked up at him, confusion flickering in her tired eyes. "Where are we going?" "I think your mom might be here," he said gently. "We're going to check." They stepped into the dim room. Machines beeped steadily, wires and tubes surrounding the still figure in the bed. Ella froze. Her eyes darted to the blanket tucked around the woman's body, pale blue with a sleeve dangling from beneath. "That's her coat!" Ella gasped. Her voice trembled, breaking. "That's Mommy's!" She rushed forward, stopping just short of the bed, her tiny hands curling around the side rail. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice cracking into sobs. The woman lay pale, her blonde hair tangled against the pillow, her lips tinged faintly blue. But as Ella reached forward and touched her hand, something happened. The fingers twitched, barely, but enough. Ella gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "She moved! She knows I'm here!" Liam stood behind her, his own throat closing as he rested a steadying hand on the girl's back. "You did it, Ella," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You found her." Ella pressed her forehead against her mother's arm, whispering fiercely, "I waited, Mommy, just like you said. I didn't cry. I came to find you." In that sterile ICU room, surrounded by machines and shadows, Liam felt something stir inside him, a force greater than grief, greater than loss. It was the undeniable truth of love, fierce, enduring, unshakable. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe in miracles again. The ICU was always cold, not from the thermostat, but from the silence. Even with machines humming and monitors beeping, the air felt sterile, as though it refused to carry warmth. Yet in that quiet room something sacred stirred when Ella's small fingers wrapped around her mother's still hand. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling, "it's me. I found you, just like you said." Her words cracked, but they were steady enough to fill the space. Liam stood at the edge of the bed, unsure if he should move closer or step away, but he couldn't take his eyes off the girl. Her fragile frame looked so small against the machinery, yet her presence filled the room with a strength he hadn't felt in years. The woman, Hannah, lay motionless, her chest rising and falling with the help of a ventilator. Her lips were pale, her face ashen beneath the tangle of blonde hair splayed across the pillow. She looked like someone who had been fighting far too long without anyone to notice, but at Ella's touch her fingers twitched, barely there but unmistakable. Ella gasped, her eyes wide and shining. "She knows I'm here, she really does." Liam's throat tightened. He stepped closer, resting a steadying hand on Ella's back. "Yes, sweetheart, she knows. You found her." Ella pressed her forehead gently against her mother's arm, her little body shaking with sobs. "I waited, Mommy, just like you told me. I didn't cry too much. I was so cold, but I kept going. I came to the hospital. I knew you'd be here." Her words were fragile, but they carried a kind of fierce faith that humbled Liam. This wasn't just a child clinging to hope. It was love in its purest form, unshaken by the storm that could have taken her life. For a long time, Liam said nothing. He simply watched. He had seen boardrooms filled with power, courts filled with authority, crowds that bent beneath influence, but nothing compared to this. A child's whispered devotion pulling a woman back from the edge, and it broke something open in him. Years ago, he had stood in a hospital room not unlike this one, holding Claire's hand as life slipped quietly from her body. He remembered the helplessness, the rage at his inability to stop time, the hollow silence that followed. He remembered watching Max's small chest rise and fall as he slept in a waiting room chair, completely unaware that their lives had just been torn in half. That night, Liam had promised himself never to get too close again, never to risk feeling that kind of devastation. Work became his armor, money his distraction. He convinced himself love was fragile, unreliable, something he could live without. But now, watching Ella cling to her mother, refusing to give up, Liam realized he had been wrong. Love wasn't fragile. It was the strongest thing in the world, strong enough to send a 5-year-old wandering through a snowstorm just to keep a promise. Strong enough to stir life in a body the doctors had nearly given up on. He exhaled slowly, the weight of his chest loosening for the first time in years. Ella finally looked up, her cheeks wet, her tiny hand still gripping her mother's. "Mr. Liam," she whispered, her voice shaky but sincere. "Did I do good? I found her like I was supposed to." His vision blurred as he crouched beside her, his voice rough. "Ella, you did more than good. You were brave. Braver than anyone I've ever met." Her lips trembled into a small, exhausted smile. She leaned into him, her head pressing against his shoulder while her hand never let go of her mother's. For the first time since he had found her in that alley, Liam felt her body relax, as if she finally believed she was safe. He reached for the blanket at the end of the bed, pulling it gently over her shoulders. "Stay here," he murmured. "Your mom needs you. She can feel you here." Ella nodded, her eyes fluttering shut. Her breathing slowed, matching the rhythmic rise and fall of the machines. Even half asleep, her small hand clung to her mother's fingers like a lifeline. Liam stood, his gaze fixed on the two of them. It was a picture he knew would never leave him. A child who refused to stop believing, and a mother who, even in silence, kept her promise. For the first time in a long time, Liam didn't feel haunted by the past. He felt humbled. He felt something dangerously close to faith. He whispered into the stillness, not sure if anyone could hear. "You're not alone anymore, neither of you." And though Hannah remained unconscious, though Ella drifted into sleep with tear-streaked cheeks, something undeniable filled the room. Not the hum of machines, not the sterile air of the ICU, but the quiet pulse of hope. The corridors of St. Teresa's Hospital grew quieter as midnight pressed in, the storm outside muffling the city into stillness. Nurses moved softly from room to room, their shoes whispering against the polished floors. Liam sat at the nurse's station, his hand resting on the counter, eyes still carrying the weight of what he had just witnessed. Ella pressed against her unconscious mother, whispering that she had kept her promise. The nurse on duty looked hesitant. "She's not a patient, Mr. Whitaker. We don't usually allow children to stay overnight." "Please," Liam said, his voice low but steady. "She's terrified. Her mother is fighting for her life just down the hall. Sending her away now, it would break her." He leaned in slightly, sincerity softening his normally commanding tone. "I'll take responsibility. I'll stay with her, just for tonight." The nurse studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. "There's a small quiet room next to the lounge. A cot, a chair, nothing fancy. I'll make sure she has a blanket." Relief coursed through him. "Thank you," Liam said sincerely. He walked back to Ella, who sat on the edge of the ICU bed, her hand still wrapped around her mother's. Her eyes were heavy, her little shoulders sagging beneath the weight of exhaustion she shouldn't have had to carry. "Ella," he whispered gently, "we're going to let Mommy rest now. But I've got a bed for you right down the hall." Her lip quivered. "I don't want to leave her." "You won't be far," he promised. "I'll take you there and I'll stay with you the whole night. When you wake up, you can come right back." Slowly, reluctantly, she nodded. He lifted her into his arms, lighter than Max had been at that age, too light, and carried her down the hall. The quiet room was small but warm, a narrow bed pressed against the wall, a chair beside it, and a single lamp casting a golden glow. Ella curled onto the cot without protest, clutching her worn backpack like a stuffed animal. Liam sat beside her, pulling the blanket over her small body. "Did I do good, Mr. Liam?" she mumbled, her voice slurred with sleep. He leaned closer, brushing her hair back. "You were amazing, the bravest girl I've ever met." Her eyelids drooped, but she managed one last whisper. "I found her, just like she said. I didn't cry much." "I know," he said softly. "You were so strong." Within moments, her breathing slowed into the rhythm of sleep, her small hands still clutching the strap of her backpack. Liam stayed seated, watching her chest rise and fall. He should have felt like an outsider here, a stranger who had simply stumbled into someone else's story. But instead he felt rooted, bound by something far deeper than chance. He reached into the paper bag he had carried from home and pulled out a familiar book, The Snowy Day. He hadn't read it in years, not since Max was small enough to curl into his lap, eyes wide as he turned each page. He opened it now, his voice low, reading softly though Ella was already asleep. And that's how Max found him. The boy had been brought by a sitter an hour earlier, restless, insistent on seeing his father. Now he stood just outside the quiet room, clutching a folded piece of paper in his hand. Through the crack in the door he saw his father sitting beside a sleeping girl, reading their book. Max froze. His chest tightened, a strange mix of anger and sadness twisting inside him. That used to be his place. His dad's voice reading those words, his dad's eyes soft with love. Now it was for her. He took a step back, unsure if he even wanted to be seen, but Liam looked up, sensing movement, and their eyes met. "Max," Liam said softly, closing the book. He rose quickly and opened the door. "Hey, buddy, come in." Max hesitated, his fingers tightening around the paper. "I brought something," he muttered, thrusting it forward. Liam unfolded it carefully. It was a crayon drawing, two kids building a snowman with a taller figure smiling beside them. Written in shaky letters across the top were the words, "For Ella." Liam's throat tightened. He crouched, so he was eye level with his son. "This is beautiful. You want to give it to her when she wakes up?" Max shook his head quickly. "You can." A beat of silence stretched between them before Max blurted, "You used to read that book to me." Liam blinked. "Yeah, I did." "You haven't in a while?" Max's voice cracked. "I'm not too old, not really." Pain hit Liam square in the chest. He reached for his son's shoulder. "I can read it to you tonight. Just say the word." Max looked down at his shoes, his voice small. "Do you still think about Mom?" Liam's face softened instantly. "Every day." "Then why do you look happy again?" Max's words tumbled out, trembling. Are you going to love them more than us?" Liam's breath caught. He dropped to his knees, pulling his son close. "Max, no, never. You've been everything to me, everything. But that little girl, she reminds me of you and her mom. She has no one. They're scared and maybe I've started to care. But that doesn't mean I'll ever stop loving you." Max's fists clenched at his sides. "When Mom died, I thought it would just be us. And now it's like you're not just ours anymore." Liam's voice grew rough. Change doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean replacing. I'll never stop missing Mom, and I'll never stop loving you. That will never change. For a moment, Max stayed rigid in his arms. Then his voice broke into a whisper. I just don't want to lose someone again. Liam pressed his forehead to his son's. You won't, I promise you. And if I ever make you feel that way, you tell me, okay? Max swallowed hard, then nodded. Okay. A fragile truce settled between them. Slowly, Max slipped his small hand into Liam's, and together they stepped back into the room. Max walked to the cot where Ella slept and placed the drawing gently beside her pillow. He didn't say anything, but he lingered for a second longer, his eyes softer than before. Liam watched them both, his son and the little girl who had stumbled into their lives on Christmas Eve, and realized his world was shifting. Not away from Max, but toward something bigger, something scarier, something that might just heal them all. The ICU room was dim except for the steady glow of monitors, their beeps marking time with mechanical precision. Liam sat slouched in a chair, exhaustion pulling heavy at his body. Ella was asleep in the quiet room down the hall, Max with her. For once, the hospital felt still. He rubbed his face and looked at the folded coat sitting on the side table, the coat the paramedics had taken off Hannah when she was brought in. It looked ordinary, pale blue, frayed at the cuffs, the fabric worn thin in places. But something about it pulled at him. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe the gnawing sense that he needed to know more about this woman who had fought her way through life alone. He lifted the coat and ran his hands through the pockets. At first there was nothing, just lint and a few coins. Then tucked deep in the lining, his fingers brushed against paper. He pulled it free. An envelope, yellowed with time, folded neatly in half. Curiosity turned to something sharper when he opened it. Inside was a handwritten card. The ink had smudged in places, but the words were still legible. Thank you for holding my hand when I thought I was going to lose my daughter. I will never forget your kindness, the way you whispered. She's strong. So are you. I don't even know your name, but you were wearing the softest blue gloves, and your voice made the room stop spinning. Bless you, whoever you are. It was signed in Claire's handwriting. With all my heart, Claire Whitaker. Liam's chest seized. He read the note again, his eyes blurring. Claire, his late wife. He remembered the night vividly. When their daughter Lily was born, complications had struck. Chaos had filled the delivery room, and he had been helpless, panicked, useless. Claire had told him later about a young nurse with blonde hair, calm eyes, and soft blue gloves. She held my hand until Lily cried, Claire had whispered with a smile. I don't even know her name, but she was my anchor. And now, years later, here she was. Hannah Bennett. The same woman who had once been a stranger offering comfort had reappeared, broken, collapsed in a stairwell, but her child had survived because of her strength. Liam sat frozen, the card trembling in his hand. The world felt impossibly small, time folding in on itself. He whispered hoarsely, You were there, back then, and now your daughter showed up in mine. He pressed the card to his chest, the ache in him shifting into something else, gratitude, awe, and a terrifying sense of destiny. When morning came, the light poured pale and golden through the ICU blinds. Liam was still there, sitting close, the card on the table beside him. Hannah stirred for the first time, her body shifting beneath the sheets. He leaned forward instantly, his breath catching. Her eyes fluttered open, hazy and confused. She blinked at the ceiling, then turned her head slowly. Her lips cracked with a whisper. Ella, where's my daughter? A nurse rushed in, her voice calm but firm. Miss Bennett, take it slow, you've just woken up. But Hannah gripped the sheets, panic flashing across her face. Where's my little girl? Before the nurse could answer, Liam stepped into view, his hand resting gently on Ella's shoulder as the child peeked shyly from behind him. She's right here. Mommy! Ella's cry broke the sterile silence. She scrambled forward, climbing onto the bed, her small arms wrapping fiercely around her mother's chest. I found you, Mommy, just like you said. I came to the hospital. Hannah's arms trembled as they closed around her daughter, tears streaming down her face. My baby, she whispered, pressing kisses into Ella's hair. I'm so sorry you were alone. Ella shook her head fiercely, clinging tighter. You didn't leave me. You said you'd come back. I waited, and you did. Liam stood a step back, his vision burning. He had seen thousands of reunions, celebrations, and heartbreaks in his life, but nothing compared to this. A child who had braved the coldest night to keep faith, and a mother who had fought through collapse just to keep her promise. When Hannah finally looked up, her gaze landed on him. For a moment, she froze, studying his face as though trying to place him. "You're the man who saved her," she whispered. "And she saved you," Liam said gently. Hannah's eyes glistened. "Thank you." He hesitated, then reached for the card on the table. "I think this isn't the first time we've met." He handed it to her carefully. She frowned, unfolding the paper with shaking hands. Her breath caught the second she saw the handwriting. Her lips parted, her face paling as memories flooded back. "I remember this. Years ago, a young mother in labor. She was so scared." Her eyes lifted to Liam's, wide with disbelief. "That was your wife?" He nodded slowly, emotion thick in his voice. "Claire, she told me about you, the nurse with blonde hair and blue gloves who never let go of her hand." Hannah pressed the card to her chest, tears spilling anew. "I never forgot her. I never forgot that night." For a long moment, neither spoke. The weight of the past and present seemed to merge, their lives unexpectedly intertwined by kindness given in one desperate hour and now returned in another. Ella nestled closer to her mother, unaware of the history binding the adults together, only knowing she had her mother's heartbeat beneath her cheek. "I love you, Mommy," she whispered drowsily. "I love you more," Hannah breathed, her voice breaking. Liam turned toward the window, snow still drifting softly outside. For the first time in years, the ache in his chest eased. This wasn't coincidence. This was grace, a reminder that sometimes, even through loss and grief, the threads of love wove people together in ways they could never explain. The days after Hannah awoke passed slowly, each one marked not just by her physical recovery but by the steady weaving together of 4 lives that had, until now, only brushed at the edges of one another. Hannah's strength returned in fragments. Her voice was raspy, her body frail, but her spirit carried a resilience that humbled everyone who came near her bed. One afternoon, as the golden light of late December spilled into the room, Liam sat by her side, listening quietly as she finally told her story. "I used to be a pediatric nurse," she began softly, her eyes fixed on Ella, who was coloring by the window with Max. "I loved that job, taking care of kids, helping parents through their worst nights. It gave me purpose. But then the migraines started. At first I could hide them, but they got worse. I missed shifts, made mistakes. Eventually I lost my position. No insurance, no backup plan. I took whatever work I could, cleaning, mopping floors, even in the same hospital where I used to walk with a stethoscope around my neck." She swallowed hard, brushing at her eyes. "I told myself as long as Ella was fed, as long as she was warm, it was enough, and she never complained. She'd sit on the floor with crayons while I scrubbed hallways, and when I apologized, she'd say, 'As long as we have each other, Mommy, we're fine.'" Her voice broke, but she pressed on. "But the truth is, we weren't fine. I was breaking, holding everything together with string, and when I collapsed in that stairwell, I thought that was it, that I had failed her." Liam leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. "You didn't fail her. She found you, and she's stronger because of you." Hannah's eyes flicked toward him, soft with gratitude but lined with doubt. "I've been strong for so long I forgot what it felt like to lean on anyone else." "You don't have to do it alone anymore," Liam said gently. Silence hung between them, filled with unspoken things, pain, memory, and something fragile, almost hopeful. Meanwhile, across the room, Ella and Max had settled into a rhythm of their own. Max, cautious at first, had been uncertain about this little girl who suddenly demanded his father's attention. But Ella's innocence disarmed him. She laughed at his corny jokes, listened intently when he explained his drawings, and never seemed to notice the shadows that sometimes darkened his expression. One afternoon, he brought her a set of crayons from the hospital gift shop. "You can't keep using the broken ones," he said, trying to sound annoyed. Ella's face lit up. "Thanks, Max. You're the best big brother ever." The word startled him. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. But later that day, Liam overheard Max whispering proudly to a nurse, "They call us the Snowstorm siblings." Pretty cool, right? And so the name stuck. Nurses began to greet them that way in the hall. "How are our Snowstorm siblings today?" Ella would giggle, Max would shrug, and both of them would secretly love it. Christmas Eve arrived quietly. Snow blanketed the city again, soft and relentless. But inside Hannah's room, warmth reigned. A small Christmas tree stood by the window, the kind sold at corner markets, its branches uneven and sparse. Liam had carried it in himself, brushing snow off his coat as he set it down. "I thought maybe we could build new traditions," he said simply. Max and Ella decorated it with paper snowflakes they cut from scrap hospital forms, each one lopsided but beautiful. Hannah watched from her bed, a smile tugging at her lips despite her fatigue. For the first time in years, the weight of survival lifted, replaced by something lighter. That evening, Liam set mugs of hot chocolate on the table, extra marshmallows for Ella, just the way she liked it. Max sat cross-legged on the floor, reading The Snowy Day aloud, his voice steady while Ella leaned against him, listening with wide eyes. Hannah pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by the sight. Her daughter, safe and happy. A boy she already adored, calling Ella his sister. And Liam, standing nearby, watching with an expression she couldn't quite name, something between tenderness and awe. When the story ended, Ella looked up at Liam, her voice quiet but filled with certainty. "Daddy, Liam, thank you for finding me." The room stilled. Liam blinked, his breath catching at the title she had given him so naturally. He knelt beside her, his hand brushing her cheek. "Thank you for letting me," he whispered. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. She reached for his hand, her fingers slipping into his, not with fear but with trust. "I used to think I was meant only to survive," she said softly. "That love like this wasn't for people like me, but you've made me believe I'm worth loving." Liam's gaze held hers, steady and sure. "You always were." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in silence. But inside that small hospital room there was laughter, warmth, and a promise unspoken but understood. They weren't bound by blood or circumstance. They were bound by something stronger, the choice to be a family. And that Christmas Eve, as the snowstorm siblings drifted to sleep beside the glow of their paper-decorated tree, Hannah and Liam sat together in the quiet, hearts no longer heavy with loss, but full with something they thought they'd never feel again: hope. Snow drifted softly past the windows of a modest townhouse, just a block from Central Park. The lights of New York shimmered in the distance, but inside the glow was warmer, more personal. Cinnamon-scented air, mismatched ornaments, laughter spilling from every corner. It had been 1 year since that fateful Christmas Eve when Liam found Ella sleeping in the snow. 1 year since Hannah opened her eyes in a hospital bed, fragile yet unbroken. And 1 year since Max realized that family didn't shrink when it opened its doors. It grew. The living room now looked nothing like the hollow space it had once been. A Christmas tree stood tall by the fireplace, decked with paper snowflakes, hand-painted ornaments, and gingerbread cookies strung with ribbon. On the mantel rested framed drawings, Max's crayon sketches, Ella's colorful scribbles, both signed with crooked hearts. Above them a new family photo, Liam, Hannah, Max, and Ella, all bundled in winter coats, their smiles as bright as the lights above Rockefeller Plaza. Max knelt by the tree, carefully sliding a package wrapped in shiny blue paper toward Ella. She tore it open slowly, savoring each rip until the cover of a handmade book appeared. Ella gasped, her little hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. Each one was filled with Max's drawings. Snowstorms, 2 children hand in hand, a tall figure always beside them. At the top of the first page, written in block letters, "To my little sister from your big brother Max." Tears welled instantly in Ella's eyes. She threw her arms around him, squealing, "Thank you, Max!" Max squirmed, blushing furiously. Okay, don't cry on it, it'll smudge the colors." But his grin betrayed his pride. From the kitchen doorway, Liam watched them, his chest full in a way he hadn't thought possible again. He remembered the man he'd been a year ago, hollow, broken, convinced that Christmas miracles belonged only to other people. Now, standing here with hot cocoa in hand and 2 children laughing beneath a tree, he realized he'd been wrong. Miracles didn't always arrive in grandeur. Sometimes they came as a lost child in the snow, or the quiet resilience of a woman who refused to give up. Hannah stepped into the room, her blonde hair braided loosely over her shoulder, a red knit dress draping softly around her frame. She carried a tray of cookies, gingerbread men slightly lopsided from Ella's decorating attempts. She paused, watching Max and Ella giggling over the book, her eyes shining with a tenderness that still startled her. Liam walked over and pressed a mug into her free hand, hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, just the way she liked. "You remembered?" she teased softly. "I remember everything," he murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. For a long moment they stood together, the noise of the children filling the air like music. Hannah reached for his hand, her fingers lacing through his with quiet certainty. "I used to think I was only meant to survive," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "To keep my head down, to push through, to raise Ella the best I could. I thought love like this wasn't for people like me." Liam brushed a tear from her cheek, his voice steady. "You were never meant to carry it all alone. You were always worth loving." Her lips trembled into a smile as she leaned into him. "And you were always meant to find us." Ella suddenly spun around, clutching her new book. "Daddy Liam," she called out, her little voice full of sincerity. "Thank you for finding me." The words stopped him cold. Every time she called him that, Daddy Liam, his heart broke and healed all at once. He knelt to her level, his hand cupping her cheek. "Thank you for letting me," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Max slid closer, his arm looping protectively around Ella's shoulders. "We're snowstorm siblings," he declared proudly, as though the title made them invincible. Hannah laughed softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "That's exactly what you are." Later that evening, when the children finally drifted off, Ella curled against Max's side with her new book clutched tightly. Liam and Hannah sat by the fireplace. The room was quiet, except for the crackling of logs and the faint hum of Christmas music from the radio. Liam reached for the small envelope he had carried in his wallet all year, the thank you card Claire had once written to Hannah, though neither had known it then. He set it gently on the coffee table. "This is how our story began," he said. Hannah's hand trembled as she touched it, her eyes glistening. "And this," she whispered, glancing toward the sleeping children, "is how it continues." Liam leaned closer, his forehead brushing hers. Not survival, not loneliness, a family. Outside, snow fell heavier, blanketing the city in white. But inside that home, warmth spread through every corner. It wasn't the grandeur of wealth or the perfection of flawless ornaments. It was a small Christmas tree strung with paper decorations, 2 children giggling in their sleep, and 2 adults finally daring to believe in second chances. For Liam, Hannah, Max, and Ella, this Christmas wasn't just a holiday. It was proof that love could be born again from brokenness, stitched together by resilience, trust, and the courage to open one's heart. And as the night deepened, Liam whispered the truth to himself, the truth he now lived every day. Miracles don't always come when you're searching for them. Sometimes they find you, in the snow, when you've nearly forgotten how to hope. Life rarely unfolds the way we expect. Liam Carter had once believed his story ended with grief, that love had no place in a heart broken by loss. Hannah Bennett thought she was destined only to survive, never to know the comfort of being cherished. Max feared his father's heart would drift away, and Ella, just a little girl, had braved a snowstorm, clinging to nothing but faith in her mother's promise. 4 lives, fractured and wandering, collided on a bitterly cold Christmas Eve. What began as tragedy grew into something extraordinary. A family stitched together not by blood but by love, trust, and second chances. In Ella's courage we saw the purest kind of faith, a child's unshaken belief that love always finds its way back. In Max's journey we witnessed the quiet fear of losing what little he had left, transformed into pride as he embraced his new role as brother. In Hannah's resilience, we discovered the strength it takes to carry pain with grace, and the vulnerability it requires to finally set that burden down. And in Liam's awakening, we were reminded that even the strongest walls around a heart can crumble when met with hope. Their story teaches us something vital. Families aren't always the ones we're born into. Sometimes they're the ones we find in the most unexpected places, an alley on Christmas Eve, a hospital room filled with quiet beeping, or a living room glowing with mismatched ornaments. Love doesn't ask for perfection. It asks only for presence, for patience, for the courage to believe that even broken people deserve a new beginning. If you carry scars, if you've ever felt unworthy of happiness, or if you've convinced yourself that miracles are for other people, let this story remind you otherwise. Healing rarely happens in grand gestures. More often it comes in tiny steps, a whispered, "Thank you," a hand held in the dark, a child's drawing taped to a hospital wall. Little by little, those moments gather and rebuild us. So tonight, as you sit with this story, ask yourself, where has love already found me? And where am I still afraid to let it in? Because the truth is, you don't have to do it alone. None of us do. And if this journey touched your heart, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us what part of this story spoke to you most. Or simply let us know if it reminded you of someone you love. Don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories so you never miss a tale that might just change your perspective. Because sometimes one story is all it takes to remind us, even in the coldest winters, love always finds its way home.